Welcome to the Pursuing Points podcast, where it's all about the pursuit of credit card points and miles today so that you can travel the world free of charge tomorrow. And now, your host, Peter Foti.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is episode 19 of the Pursuing Points podcast. I am your host, as I have been for the previous 18, and as I hopefully will be for the next 19, Peter Foti. Today's episode is a little bit different insofar as the credit cards that we're going to talk about aren't necessarily products that I've talked about on the show in the past. So why is that? Well, generally, I talk about products that I use, and so these cards aren't necessarily those that you'll find in my wallet. And it's not because they're bad products. It's because the goals that I have for my spending and for my points and miles don't necessarily align with what these cards can offer. Now, if you find that these cards more closely align with what your goals are, I highly encourage you to read about them a little bit more and consider signing up. So before we get into sort of the nitty-gritty, the meat and potatoes of this episode, I just want to start by saying thank you. I've received a lot of emails, text messages. I've seen some reviews on iTunes. People seem to be responding well with the content as of late, and I think that that's awesome. I'm really humbled by the number of people that are listening to the show on a regular basis. I'm looking forward to continuing to bring you weekly episodes. It's looking like Wednesday is going to be the day. I don't know how that happened, but it seems like that is what's going to happen. So I'm generally recording these over the weekend, and then they're generally getting posted on Wednesday morning. So I would say that's sort of what you have to look forward to. Of course, that's subject to change, but for now, Wednesdays are the day. And so, yeah, thank you for your continued support and feedback. As always, if you do have feedback or you want to get in touch with me, pursuingpoints.com/contact. You can fill out the little form and send me an email. Or you can also email peter@pursuingpoints.com. Okay, now that we got that stuff out of the way. So on Tuesday, I wrote an article on the website called The 5 Best Credit Cards for Millennials. This episode is basically sort of an audio version of that article. So the article is about 2,000 words. It's going to take you, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to read it. So if you want to read it, it definitely provides a little more depth and detail than what I might be able to do here on the show today. But listening to this episode will give you enough information to where it'll help you figure out whether or not these are the types of products that you want to be signing up for. So the whole thing, what's the best credit card for millennials? Millennial has become sort of like this buzzword. And frankly, in preparing for this, obviously I had to make some generalizations, some assumptions. Those may or may not be correct. They're sort of what I think of. And of course, I'm a millennial myself, so I don't want it to sound like I'm talking down to anybody because that's just not true. But basically, if you're going to talk about a specific subgroup of people, you're going to have to make some assumptions about who those people are so that you can make good recommendations. So I detailed these in the article, but for the sake of the podcast, let's talk about them. So the first assumption or generalization that I made is that annual fees are no good. So this is not to say that if you're a millennial, you don't want to pay an annual fee, but as far as the products that I wanted to look at, if you charge an annual fee, you're not going to be included in this list. Next, things like lounge access and rental car insurance and some of those other perks, they're just not that important as things like earning potential, right? And again, this is not to say that if you're a millennial, you don't want to necessarily spend time in a lounge, but certainly I would say that by and large, people who are spending time in the Delta Lounge or the Amex Centurion Lounge are just not millennials, right? They tend to be maybe business travelers or some older folks because they have different wants, needs, and requirements. So for these cards, we're not going to get into stuff like that. And also, it's worth pointing out, if you get a card with no annual fee, you're not going to get lounge access anyway. But I just wanted to throw that out there. The third thing was that The earnings should be geared towards things that millennials tend to spend money on. And of course, making a huge generalization as to, what do millennials spend money on? But basically, I broke that down as travel, specifically things like Airbnb and Uber are important. Food and drinks are super important, right? Millennials tend to dine out more. They tend to go out for drinks more. And then the third thing would be like online shopping. So I don't think that me and people that I know are spending a whole lot of time in department stores or in Best Buy. It's more Amazon.com, frankly. 4 is cashback is generally more desirable than points or miles. This one could kind of go either way, but certainly the simplicity of cashback, I think, is probably something that millennials might get a little more excited about. Points and miles, of course, you kind of have to know, if you're going to transfer points, if you're going to go through a portal, there's just more to keep in mind. It's just not as simple, I guess. So for the sake of this exercise, I basically said that, okay, cashback is going to be more important or more desirable than points and miles. And then the fifth thing, this is basically, the credit card should have some sort of way of managing it on your mobile device. So your iPhone, your Android phone, what have you, you should be able to do pretty much everything you need to do, pay the card, check the balance, etc., from the mobile app. So those are the 5 sort of assumptions, generalizations that I made. Obviously, if you're someone for whom none of those hit home, or you're just not that interested in cards that could be good for millennials, I would say, you could basically stop listening now, because the rest of the show is just going to be about, I have 5 cards that I pulled out that sort of check off all those boxes, and then we're going to talk about the one that I would recommend the most. So that being said, we have, like I said, there's 5 cards. It's basically 6 actually, but the last 2 I put sort of together. So the cards are, we've got the Uber Visa, we've got the Capital One Saver Rewards, we've got the Discover It, we've got the Amazon Prime Rewards Visa Signature, and then the last 2 are the Chase Freedom / Freedom Unlimited. I grouped those 2 together. Of course, I didn't necessarily have to, but I just thought it would be a little bit easier to do it that way. So those are the 5 cards. We've talked about the 5 assumptions. Let's just get right into it with the Uber Visa, which is a card that I've never talked about before on the show. Frankly, I've never really even considered signing up for it. But in doing my research for this episode, I was actually sort of surprised at the amount of value that I think you could probably get out of a card like this. So, as with all the other cards we're going to talk about, and I'm not going to keep repeating this, there is no annual fee for this Uber Visa. And the sign-up bonus, as of this recording, which is in January 15th, 2018, the sign-up bonus is $100 after you spend $500 in the first 90 days. Now, as you'll see, sort of like the top of the line sign-up bonus for cards like these is around $150. The bottom of the barrel and the worst one on this list is around $70. So 100 is whatever. It's average, right? It's not necessarily fantastic. It's certainly not bad, but it could be better. So sign-up bonus, 100 after you spend 500. You can redeem your rewards for things like Uber credits, gift cards, cashback, and you can actually do all of that through the Uber app itself. So very simple, easy to use, and a sign-up bonus that, while it leaves something to be desired, it's not bad. So let's talk about earning structure. So this card, and I think that this is where the card really sort of shines. You get 4% back on dining. So this includes things like restaurants, takeout, bars, and of course Uber Eats. Now 4% is really, I think, as good as you're going to get. I mean, there's some cards that offer 3. Obviously, sometimes you might get a category card where the bonus is 5. But 4% with no cap is actually really good. And again, there's no annual fee, and these are cards for millennials, so we're sort of assuming that they're going to spend more time in restaurants and bars and takeout than they are cooking for themselves. And, I'm saying themselves, but of course I am in that category. Okay, so 4% back on dining. I think that that's fantastic. 3% on hotel and airfare, and this also includes things like vacation home rentals, which would be like Airbnb. 2% back on online purchases. So this is, your Netflix streaming services. This is Uber. This is online shopping like Amazon.com, etc. And then after that, you get 1% back on everything else that doesn't fall into one of those three categories. So right off the bat, super strong. I mean, I don't think you're going to do much better than that on a card without an annual fee from an earning structure perspective. What else does the card have? Well, if you spend $5,000 in a year, you'll get a $50 subscription credit. So basically, you could apply this to like your Netflix subscription, your Spotify subscription. You could even use it for something like Amazon Prime, which normally costs $99, but with this, you could get it for $49. Of course, you have to spend $5,000, so that's not free. But if this was the card you were going to go with and you were going to spend all your money on it, and you thought you could spend $5,000 without having to spend on stuff you don't need, then $50 makes sense. And, at that point, it is free money. The other thing that I thought was interesting is that they offer mobile phone protection. So if you pay your mobile phone bill using this card, you'll get up to $600 in protection against things like damage and theft, which, again, that's pretty cool. I think on my AT&T bill, I pay, call it like $9 a month for protection. So, what is that, $108 a year? And in this case, you're getting it for free so long as you pay the bill using this card. Now, you'll only get the 1% back on the purchase for paying with the card. So from an earnings perspective, there may be a better option for you to pay your phone bill with, but there's certainly nothing wrong with using this card. So that sort of covers that one. So that's the Uber Visa. And as with all these cards, basically in the show notes, I'll have a link to my main article. You can come through and read it. I don't have any specific links for you to sign up with these cards. So basically whatever the publicly available offer is that you find on, say, Google, that's what I would be able to link you to anyway. So that'll all be there in the show notes if you decide that one of these cards is something that you're interested in. Next card on the list, we've got the Capital One Saver Rewards credit card. Now, this one is a little underwhelming. And so the thing is, when you start off with the Uber Visa, which frankly is one of the best cards on this list, everything after that, you're sort of comparing it to that one. So with the Capital One card, first we could talk about the sign-up bonus. So the sign-up bonus is $150 after you spend $500. So from a sign-up bonus perspective, you can see the Capital One is on the upper end as far as those go. So like I said, $150 seems to be like the top dollar number for these types of cards. And that's like no annual fee cashback cards. And that's right where the Capital One Saver is. So if you were only going to make a decision based on sign-up bonus and it came down to Capital One versus Uber, you'd go Capital One. As far as earnings go, you get 3% back on dining, you get 2% back on groceries, and then you get 1% back on everything else. So I would say that from an earning structure perspective, the Capital One Saver doesn't necessarily match up all that well with something like the Uber card. And frankly, it doesn't match up super well with some of the other cards that we're going to talk about either. The thing that makes this card interesting is that 3% back on dining. But like I said before, you're going to get 4% on the Uber card, and we've got some other cards that are right around that number. So from a ranking perspective, I would say that as we go along right now, Uber is number one, and then this card would be sorry about that, I got a phone call. And this card would be number two, and of course we'll keep that. We'll keep those numbers up to date as we go. The other benefits that come with this card, so there's no foreign transaction fees. So if you're using the card out of the country, you won't have to pay any additional fees. And the points never expire. We don't obviously want points that expire if we can help it. And then lastly, it is a World Elite MasterCard. So that means that basically it comes with things like some price protections, extended warranty, travel assistance, etc. Those may or may not be things that you'll ever use if you sign up for this card. And for the sake of this, both article and podcast, I want to really just focus on earning potential, sign-up bonuses, secondary benefits. And then things like the World Elite or the Visa Signature benefits are just less important to us at this point. All right, next up. So the third card on our list is the Discover It. So this is the one, it's got those funny commercials where like a sister makes a phone call to Discover customer service and finds out that she's talking to like her sister. Basically, this card is super interesting because it's definitely a product where the consumer is the most important thing. So I guess what I mean by that is like, for instance, you don't have to pay a late fee on your first late payment. This card specifically, you get 0% APR for your first 14 months. It's got a 100% US-based customer service, which is awesome. And it just has a few of those types of things. It has a Freeze It program, which is, so on the Discover mobile app, you can actually freeze or unfreeze your card. So if you leave your card at the bar, the next morning you wake up and realize that, you go on the Discover app, you press Freeze It, and then even if someone were to find the card, they couldn't use it because it's now frozen. And then obviously, you try to get the card back, and if you can't, they'll send you a new one. So it has a few of those types of things which make it interesting. And I would consider those like the secondary benefits. As for the earning structure, so this card is 1% back on all purchases, and you get 5% back on certain categories at different times throughout the year. So basically, we have 2 category cards we're going to talk about on this show. And the one that I've talked about in the past is the Chase Freedom. So basically what this is each quarter, the credit card company defines a category or a group of categories, and any spending that you do within that category will get you 5%, up to the first $1,500 in purchases within the category. So for instance, right now for January to March 2018, the Discover It category is gas stations and wholesale clubs. Frankly, that's not super exciting. April to June would be grocery stores. July to September would be restaurants, which is exciting. And then October to December, Amazon.com, which again, that's also exciting. So basically from July to December, that 5% cash back is going to be pretty awesome. As for the sign-up bonus, this sign-up bonus is actually really interesting. If you can spend enough money. So what it is, it's called Cashback Match. And basically after your first 12 consecutive billing periods that your account is open, Discover is going to match all of the cash back that you've earned in those 12 months, right? So if you, let's just assume that you're going to earn 1%, you spend $10,000, that would be $100 in cash back. After your first 12 months, Discover is going to give you another $100. So effectively what this means is that in your first year, you're going to earn 2% back on all purchases, and then you're going to earn 10% back on your category purchases. So the break-even number is right around $7,500. That's sort of what you need. And when I say break-even, I mean $7,500 is basically the number that you need to be at to do better than or meet the $150 sign-up bonus that you'd get from, the Capital One Saver or some of the other cards that we'll talk about. So this is a really good product. Discover is a really good bank. I would definitely consider this. I actually have this card in my wallet. I signed up for it, I'm going to say probably 4 years ago at this point. I signed up. I believe the sign-up bonus was something significant at the time, $250, $300, something like that. I don't remember exactly. So I signed up. It was right around Christmas, I think, is when they bumped up the sign-up bonus. And this was before they had the cashback match, of course. So I signed up. I used the card. And then last year, I detailed this on the podcast. I was planning on canceling the card. My reasoning being that I wanted to be able to sign up for it again in the future to take advantage of another sign-up bonus. And so when I called Discover, I basically said, do you have any sort of retention offer that you could give me so that I can keep the card rather than having to cancel? And I've detailed this process on the podcast before. But basically, as a quick aside, I mean, when I do this, I'm calling up. It's generally because the card has an annual fee. And basically, I'll call and I'll just say, look, the annual fee is coming up. I don't necessarily get a ton of value out of this card on a daily basis. So do you have any sort of retention offer you can give me to help me keep the card? And in the case with Chase, I don't remember exactly what the offer was, but it was basically like if you spend, it was like $1,000 in a month for the next 3 months, we'll give you like $100 total cash back. It was something along those lines. I'm sure I could look it up. But so anyway, I still have this card in my wallet. I don't use it because, as I've said, I have other products that suit me a little bit better than this one right now. But I certainly would have no problem recommending this card to anybody, especially with this cashback match. If you can spend over that $7,500 in a year, I think you'll get a lot of value out of this product. So let's see, number 4 on our list, we've got the Amazon Prime Rewards Visa Signature. Now, I actually had an Amazon Rewards Visa. That may have been like the first real rewards card that I ever got. And then, of course, what happened was I got a letter in the mail from Chase about a year ago saying that due to inactivity, they were going to close the account. I talked about that on podcast episode. I don't remember the number, but it was called like Credit Card Spring Cleaning. I'll include a link to it in the show notes if you're interested. Basically, what this card is, it makes a ton of sense if you meet 2 criteria. The first criteria is that you spend a lot of money on Amazon.com. The second criteria is that you're a Prime Rewards member. So, and why is that? Well, the earning structure is you get 5% cash back on all your Amazon.com purchases if you are a Prime Rewards member. And as we talked about before, Prime is $99 a year. You get the free 2-day shipping. You get access to Prime Video. You get all this stuff. But if you're not a Prime member, you're only going to earn 3% back on your Amazon purchases. So, like, when it comes to stuff like this, my recommendation is generally like, if you're not a Prime member, one, that probably means you're not spending enough to make this card worth your while. But also, 2, I don't necessarily think it makes sense to put spend on a card like this if you can't maximize the benefits. So if you are a Prime member and that 5% seems interesting to you, this is something to consider. The other earning is you get 2% back on restaurants, gas stations, and drugstores. And of course, you get 1% back on everything else. The biggest downside with this card is the sign-up bonus is not great. It is, you get a it's a $70 Amazon gift card right after you sign up. So you don't have to spend any money to get it, but frankly, $70 just doesn't do anything for me at all. That's not to say that it shouldn't do something for you, but this almost reminds me of like my whole Sunglass Hut credit card where I got a $50 gift card. It's just like, if you're going to spend a lot of money on Amazon and this is going to be your primary means of doing so, and you want this card in your wallet, I think that that's great. But if you're signing up just to get a $70 gift card, I would steer you away from that. I would say, as I've said before, right, every time you apply for a card, that's a hard inquiry on your credit report, whether you're approved or denied. And so you basically just have to ask yourself, how much is a hard inquiry worth to me? Now, if your score is super high, like if you're over 800, okay, then it doesn't mean as much, because even if your score drops by, 10 points, which is what it probably would with a hard inquiry, it really doesn't matter. You're still going to have access to the best rates and you'll still get approved for most cards. But if you're someone who your score, you're sort of teetering on the edge of what we would consider like really good, which is sort of anything over 700 or maybe 720 on the safe side, wasting a hard inquiry for a $70 gift card doesn't make a ton of sense to me. So if you're someone like you're at a 650, I would just keep chugging along until you're at the 7 or 720 and then get a card that you really like. So the sign-up bonus on this one does nothing for me. I don't think that's reason enough to sign up for it. The earning structure is good. It definitely could be better. And of course, we've already got 2% back with the Uber card. The Discover card will get 5% in some of the categories. So this is definitely a card to consider, but I'm going to put it down there with the Saver as far as like if the Saver is the 5th best, I would say this is the 4th best so far. And wrapping it up. So wrapping it up, we've got the Chase Freedom and the Freedom Unlimited. So the Freedom is basically like the Discover It. So you earn 1% on everything, and then you get the 5% on the rotating categories. The Freedom Unlimited, on the other hand, is probably the simplest card of all the cards we've talked about. So on that one, you're going to get 1.5% back on everything. So super simple. Both of them, obviously, there's no annual fee. The sign-up bonus is the same for both of them, which is the publicly available sign-up bonus is $150 after you spend $500 in 90 days. So those are right up there with some of the best sign-up bonuses on this list. Actually, they are 2 of the best. And the thing that makes these cards so interesting, and I've talked about this a lot before, I am planning on writing an article to sort of cement this, but with Chase, we have this thing, I call it like the trifecta. So that is, you can take one or both of these cards and then combine them with either the Sapphire Preferred or the Sapphire Reserve. And what you can do is transfer the points, say, from your Freedom to your Sapphire Reserve. And what that allows you to do, so in my case, I love the Chase Travel Portal. I get a 50% bonus on redemptions through the portal, right? So 5 points from my Freedom becomes 7.5 in the portal. So basically, if you're someone who you're looking for sort of your first rewards card, both of these are really good. And if for no other reason than you can take the points someday once you've got yourself either a Sapphire Preferred or a Sapphire Reserve, and you can combine the points balances, right? And so, not only can you redeem them in the portal, you can also transfer them to travel partners, right? So like without a Sapphire Reserve, there's no way to take your points from your Freedom and transfer them to, say, British Airways. But if you have the Reserve, now you can combine your balances and then transfer those points to British Airways or Hyatt or United or Ritz-Carlton. There's a whole host of travel partners that you could look into. So I really like those cards. I have both of them in my wallet. I use both of them on a regular basis. And I think that they make the most sense if you're planning on getting the Preferred or the Reserve at some point in the future. Okay, so that was a lot. We're 27 minutes in. So I want to talk about, first I want to talk about what you should do before you sign up, and then we'll talk about the overall results. So, and I already kind of touched on this, right? Before you sign up, the most important thing, and this is for any credit card, right? You have to know what your credit score is. Why do you have to know that? Well, like I said, a hard inquiry is a hard inquiry, regardless of whether you get approved or denied. And nothing is really worse than signing up for a card, taking the hard inquiry, and then getting denied, because now you're worse off than you were before. Your score is going to go down for some time because of the hard inquiry, and you've got nothing to show for it in the form of a new product. So check your credit score. I've written extensively about Credit Karma. There's also Credit Sesame. There's ways for you to get it. So check your score, make sure it's significant. For pretty much any rewards card, which is almost pretty much anything we've ever talked about on the show, you really need to be 700 or better. 720 is going to be better than 700, of course, and then obviously everything after that is just gravy. So check your score. If you're not at a place where you think you can get approved for this type of product, stick with whatever you're doing. So if you're spending money on a secured card, if you're spending money on a card you got from a credit union, just keep spending your money, paying your bills, improving your score. Patience is a virtue. We don't want to rush into this stuff. Don't apply until you think you're ready to get approved. If you have a specific question and you want to ask, me, like, should I apply for this? Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to take a look and give you my opinion. So that being said, the overall results, best sign-up bonus, I'm going to give to the Discover It. Like I said, if you can spend $7,500 in your first year, That'll get you the $150 in rewards, and then everything after that is gravy. So, I mean, you can definitely turn this into, a $200, $300, $400, $500 sign-up bonus if you could spend the money. The best overall earning structure, I'm going to say, is the Uber Visa. I love the 4% on dining. I love the 3% on travel. That would be good for any card, much less one that doesn't have an annual fee. The best earning structure for a single category, I'm going to give to the Amazon Prime. So, 5% on all your Amazon purchases is significant. A lot of people spend a lot of money on Amazon. I'm definitely one of those people. So that makes a ton of sense to me. The best potential, this is obviously kind of a made up category, but this obviously I'm sure you could guess is going to go to the Freedom Unlimited. So if you're just getting started out with rewards cards, I think it makes a lot of sense to pick one of these, spend your money on it, earn your points, and then someday when you're ready to graduate to sort of the preferred/reserve, now you've got those points, you can combine the balances, and you're well on your way to some awesome redemptions. And then lastly, best secondary perks. This is kind of a toss-up between the Discover It and the Uber Visa. Like I said, the Discover It has that freeze it. It gives you a free FICO credit score every month. They've got the 100% US-based customer service. So they've got some really cool stuff going on. The 0% APR for 14 months is great. Although, you should be paying off your balance every month, hopefully. But that's good if you need it. But I ultimately decided to give this to the Uber Visa. The $50 credit after you spend $5,000 is pretty cool. And then the free mobile phone protection is pretty cool as well. So yeah, that's that. We talked about 5 different cards. As far as which one should you sign up for, like I said, that's really a personal, that's really a personal decision. As I've always said, right, it's important to understand where you're spending your money and then sign up for a card that will allow you to maximize those expenditures. So sit down, figure out, okay, this is what I'm spending on Amazon, this is what I'm spending on dining, this is what I'm spending on travel, and then pick the card that's going to allow you to maximize those expenditures. That's all for today. 32 minutes, right on time. I do have another episode coming out next week. We're going to be talking about dining programs. So if you're not familiar with those, you're going to want to stay tuned for that. Like I said before, I appreciate the feedback and the support. If you can, we really appreciate iTunes reviews. So those should only take a second. If you feel like the show provides you with some value and you want to leave a review, I would really appreciate it. And again, Peter@pursuingpoints.com with any questions, comments, concerns. And I will see you all next week.